it's Sam, and in this video I'm going to be reviewing the Spectrum Noir markers and just kind of seeing how they compare with Copic markers. Now if you're new to my channel, I have reviewed another alcohol-based marker in the past, and I've also reviewed quite a few other products. I'll put a link in the description to a playlist which shows all of those videos. And if you're particularly interested in more tutorial-based videos, I'll have a link in the description for that as well, for basically any alcohol-based marker. Now one more thing before we get into this review is I just want to give a quick mention and shout out to Crazy Comic Lady, who kindly gifted this set for my birthday, and I just kind of wanted to give her a little hey, thank you. She also reviewed these particular markers, and I'll include a link in the description to her video if you'd like to see her opinion on these same markers. Alright, enough with that, let's go ahead and start looking into these markers. Alright, so just a heads up, I'm recording this while a little bit sick, so if I sound nasally, this is why. But anyway, here are the markers that I have. This is the Pale Hues set, and this is the Brown set. They do sell them in larger packages. I just happened to get this one mostly because CCL did gift me this one, so I figured I would just get the same type of set. If you're curious, this is the back of the package, so feel free to pause to take a better look at that. So the first thing that I did notice is that they are quite large. I have looked at these before in stores, and it's just kind of shocking when you first see it in person. I'm so used to Copic markers and other similar sized markers. It's also a hexagon shape. There's the bullet nib side, which is marked by the gray line, and the chisel tip side. They do have a rubber grip here. The company name is printed on right here, and they have the labels on the caps. And here's just a quick little shot of all of them all together for which ones you get in the set. Size-wise, the Spectrum Noir is most definitely larger. The Copic markers that I have the brush tip. However, Spectrum Noir does come with brush tip options. Just this particular marker sets do not have brush tips. They also offer refills, and they offer replacement nibs. They also sell these markers individually, so you don't just have to buy them in sets. And I was really impressed by the fact that they sell refills, because I was actually interested in Winsor & Newton markers. However, after I messaged them asking if they were to eventually sometime in the future incorporate refills into their production, they basically told me a flat out no. So basically Copics have been the only ones on the market with a refill, and now Spectrum Noir does too, and I'm really happy and excited about that. Since I don't have any Copic markers with a bullet tip, I can only compare the chisel nibs. The Spectrum Noir is quite larger than the Copic chisel nib. Not really a plus or a minus there, it's just different. Alright, so that was a quick look at the bodies. Let's go ahead and see what these guys looked like swatched out. Alright, so this is a little overview of the Pale Hues set. Just the initial swatching out on the top plus the labeling, and then trying to do a couple blend tests. Testing out the different sizes that you could get with the chisel fine tip, more blending, testing out with different pens. I tried out just drawing the Micron Stabilo in a Daiso pen and then going over that with the marker just to see how it would bleed. And the Daiso one was definitely the worst, but not many people use these pens, but the other ones did just fine. I also tested out what it would look like to try out some white over different white tools on top of them. So the top is charcoal, which was pretty light, the Sakura gel pen, which probably not the best example, but and then the Keshimaru-kun pen, which was the most opaque. And then a quick swatch of all of them at the bottom. Now, a thing that I noticed quite immediately when swatching this out and testing out these markers is that the values of these different markers are almost basically the same. Like if you were to turn this black and white, they have almost no value range. They're all very light in value, and the darkest one was this TNT2, but it wasn't really that dark in comparison to the rest, so you don't really have any midtones, any darks, you don't really have a nice mix of value. So in terms of getting some nice strong contrast pieces from these types of markers, if in this particular set that's not really possible. I do have a video talking about spray fixative, which you can use with these, and it does work with these. I'll put that link in the description if you'd like to check that out. I tested out a variety of both alcohol-based and water-based markers. So I was a little disappointed. Granted, that's only 6 markers in a set, and they probably want to try and get them quite similar so you can more easily blend with them, but I was a bit disappointed with the lack of variety of value. So here's the swatched out brown set. Again, the same thing, I just swatched each color out, labeling it, did some blend testing, did some testing with the different, with the chisel and the fine tip. Zooming in on the bottom here, you can tell that I did a test with just regular rubbing alcohol, as well as the lightest value in this set, which is the GB8. Again, some more testing with white tools, just some more playing around, and then a blend test here at the bottom. If you haven't noticed already, this set suffers from the same issues as the Pale Hues set, which is the lack in variety of values. Again, if you turn this black and white, you can more clearly see that it's dark, 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 sort of kind of dark, but not as dark, and the lightest that there is in this set. So again, no lights, not really any midtones. This is the closest to a midtone that this set has. Again, makes this set kind of difficult to work with in terms of value-wise. Also, the EB8 and the EB5 are significantly similar. The EB8 is almost like a black. If you do kind of use it lightly, you do have a bit of a brown tone to it. However, it is kind of essentially just a black. And this EB5 is just so close to it, it's almost as if you're basically getting the same exact colors. I kind of wish they just had this and then replace this with a much lighter brown, because if you layered this enough, especially with spray fixative, you could achieve this color, or at least something close to it. So having a lighter brown, I think, would have been a huge advantage to this set and would have made a really big difference. And I think would have really helped in having this be more closer to a skin tone set. I'll talk about that in a little bit. In terms of blending with them though, I didn't talk about this with the Pale set, but they essentially work the same. I found them quite comparable to Copic. Here you can see that I tried my best to find the closest markers that I own out of the Copic sets to match Spectrum Noirs. There's probably closer Copic markers, I just don't own all of them, so I can't really compare. Some of them were a bit of a struggle to find a match because the brown set in particular was just more saturated than any of the browns that I have with Copic. And I didn't mention this yet, but this is kind of important. This PP1 color right here is actually not a natural appearing pink. And what I mean by that is it's very highlighter-esque. I couldn't pick it up with scans, and I'm not sure if the camera is going to be able to pick it up, but this is a very vibrant pink. It's not like a hot, hot pink like the fluorescence sets in Copics, but it's still very close to a highlighter pink, and I found it to kind of be a more troublesome marker for me in that set because I prefer more natural colors than some more fun party bright ones. But if you do really like vibrant stuff or whatever, then you'd probably really like this pink. Nothing wrong with the pink, but I prefer, you know, doing natural colors like landscapes and portraits and things like that, so this color would be a bit difficult for me to use. Similar with the browns, the saturation is just a bit stronger than what I would prefer. But this is like total nitpicks, this is total personal preference, this is nothing against the markers themselves. The colors are perfectly fine, it just depends on what you're interested in. So down here at the bottom, I did my best to kind of do a swatching, blending, gradient compare with the closest markers that I could find with Copic versus the Spectrum Noir markers. I tried my best to blend the darkest tone in the Pale Hues set with the lightest tone in the brown set, and I really wish I had an in-between because they are close, but there's just that one mid-tone that would just make it so much better and would make it so much easier, and it's such a shame that they don't have a stronger variety of values. But I did find them to be very comparable blending wise. I used the chisel tip for everything here, so it was a fair comparison to blend Copic with the chisel tip and blending the Spectrum Noir with the chisel tip. Aside from the just difference in color and a little bit in value, like they were very comparable. And then again over here, just the rubbing alcohol test again, just to see what it would look like to use rubbing alcohol with them. The results are pretty much what I expect from a alcohol-based marker. And before I move on to the demonstration, I do want to quick mention the color chart because just from opening the package, it can be very confusing. In fact, I didn't even know that the color names actually meant anything. Like, what does EB2 mean? I have no idea. I just feel like Copics names are a little bit more intuitive. If it says R, then you know it's red. If you look it up on their website, they do explain it. I just wish that either the packages had some sort of explanation on it, or just told you what the labels meant, or just some sort of helpful detail, which it does not contain. But if you do go on their website and you look for the coloring coloring system, which is what these markers are called, the coloring system from Spectrum Noir. You can download a color chart, which you can fill in. I'll put a link in the description directly to the PDF that you can save and use for yourself. But for example, like the PP1, which I mentioned earlier, it stands for pale pink, and it is the first, so one in the set of pale pinks from 1 to 6. If you have any other questions about what any of the labels are, it's all on the color chart. I'll link it in the description. Oh, and before I forget, one really big negative for these markers. I know this can be really difficult, and I know a lot of marker brands tend to get this stuff wrong, but it's just kind of frustrating when you're trying to quickly grab something and the cap is 100% different than what you see. So this PP1, the pale pink one color cap, is almost white. It's like a very ghost pink color, like just a drop of pink, if anything. It's not at all like this fluorescent highlighter looking pink over here. And this is pretty much this case with all the colors. Here's the GB8, which is, it's just 100% like a different color. Definitely swatch these out on whatever papers you're going to be using, because the caps are not at all representative of what you're getting. I'm just kind of confused actually as to why they didn't choose these colors for the caps when these colors are significantly closer than what is actually on the cap. So these are still kind of off, but they are way closer than any of the caps. So always swatch your markers, kids. All right, so that's it for the swatches. Let's go ahead and get into the demonstration, and I'll talk a little bit more about how they performed, pluses, minuses, neutrals, stuff like that. So before I get into the studies themselves, I just want to quick explain how I got about doing these studies. What I did was I scanned in the swatches, I turned them black and white to find the value range, the best value range of the colors possible, picked those colors, created a gradient map in Photoshop the best I could, and then overlaid those over my references so I had a better idea of where to place what colors where, sort of thing. Alrighty, on to the markers. So the pluses I found were, despite the shape of the markers and despite the size, it was fairly comfortable to hold. I didn't really have a problem. The colors are also quite strong. Like I mentioned, the browns are quite saturated, so they really pop off the page pretty well, and the blend is very comparable to Copic. A lot of my issues with these markers are just kind of nitpicks, probably similar nitpicks that I would have if I had bullet-tipped Copic markers as well. For example, it was difficult to get more smaller details with the bullet nib or even the chisel nib. I just couldn't really get that small. I prefer to draw smaller, so getting in really thin lines or having some sort of stuff taper was more difficult. That's something that would have been easier to achieve with a brush nib, and that's just not what I have with these particular markers. I would have had a completely different experience if I had gotten the brush-tipped markers of Spectrum Noir. So know that that is an option. You don't have to get these if you don't want to. Due to the low value range and just the kind of saturated colors, it was quite difficult to get more natural skin tones. I found that the Pale Hues and the brown sets, just the colors didn't, I mean, you can work and like get skin tone colors, but they're just not ones that I'm used to working with and just not my preference. So it's kind of difficult to sort of find a blend to make things work. So things are just a little bit off. And like I mentioned, the lack of midtones was the biggest thing I was fighting when doing these pieces. I just didn't have a way to blend the darks with the lights. I tried what I could. I used a colorless blender from the Copic marker set, but it's just rubbing alcohol, it doesn't really matter, to try and help blend things out a little bit, which it did, but still, again, it's not really a replacement for having some sort of mid-tone color. I also found the tip-to-tip method to not really work. With Copic markers, when I use the brush nibs, I tend to quite easily just touch the two tips together to get sort of a quick in-between little brush down. But with this, with the bullet nibs, and when I try to use it, it wouldn't work. Like, it wouldn't really pick up the color and it wouldn't really put anything down. And I don't know if that's a bullet nib issue or if that's an issue with these markers. Like, I don't know. Like, if I had a bullet nib with Copic, like, would I have experienced a similar thing? I'm not sure. Just figured I would mention that the tip-to-tip thing didn't really work for me here. The smell is also quite strong. It's a very weirdly sweet sort of smell. So if you're extra sensitive, I would just open a window or open a door or something while you're using them. The bleed is quite similar to Copic, like if you lay down it on the paper, it'll spread a little bit. That's very similar with Copic, and the bleed through, where it goes in through the other side of the paper, very similar, if not the same as Copic. I'm using Arteza sketchbook paper, which I have a review on my channel. Feel free to check that out, link in the description. Not my favorite paper for markers. They tend to bleed more significantly than on Strathmore, for example, but definitely play around with different paper options just to kind of see what works. And just to kind of go back to getting small details, because the fine and chisel tip couldn't get as small of details as I wanted, I ended up going back in with a brown pen to kind of get in those really fine lines like the eyelashes and stuff like that I just couldn't achieve with these markers because they were too thick. I enjoyed using them though. They were quite, aside from just the mid-tone issues, they were quite easy to work around and to use. So overall, I think they're really nice markers. And that is it for my review of these Spectrum Noir markers. I'm pretty happy with how they performed. Again, just little nitpicks here and there, but I think all in all they make for a really great set, especially for people who might be new or inexperienced to alcohol-based markers and are looking for a cheaper alternative than the just name brand Copic markers. So if you guys have tried out this brand, feel free to let me know what you thought of it in the comments down below, and if there's any other sort of art supplies, markers, or whatever that you'd like to see me check out and just hear my opinions on, then let me know what you want to see in the comments down below as well. And if I missed anything, or if you guys want to check anything else out, I'll go ahead and put a whole bunch of awesome stuff in the description down below, so definitely check it out. So I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching my video. So thanks so much for watching. Bye!